Chapter 11, Segment 3, Speech Perception. In casual conversation, we produce about 10 to 15 consonants and vowels per second. To achieve this acoustic feature, our articulators, like our tongue, lips, jaw, and so on, must do many different things very quickly. Experienced talkers also adjust their production in anticipation of where articulators need to be next. In these ways, productions of one sound overlaps production of the next. Co-articulation is the phenomenon in speech whereby attributes of successive speech units overlap in articulatory or acoustic patterns. Although co-articulation does not cause much trouble for listeners to understanding speech, it has made it harder for speech perception researchers. Co-articulation and lack of invariance. To get a better sense of what co-articulation is, say the word moody a few times and note the activity of your tongue as you form the D sound. One might expect context sensitivity to cause a significant problem for speech perceivers, because it means there are no invariants that we can count on to uniquely identify different speech sounds. Explaining how listeners understand speech despite all this variation has been one of the most significant challenges for speech researchers. Context sensitivity due to co-articulation also presents one of the greatest difficulties in developing computer recognition of speech. Categorical perception. Why do children acquire this ability so early and easily? Shortly after World War II, researchers invented machines that could produce speech-like sounds, and they started testing listeners to try to determine exactly what the acoustic cues were that enabled them to distinguish different speech sounds. Furthermore, listeners appeared incapable of hearing that much of anything was different when two sounds were labeled as the same consonant. Categ- Categorical perception. For speech as well as other complex sounds and images, the phenomenon by which the discrimination of items is no better than the ability to label items. Listeners report hearing differences between sounds only when those differences will result in different labels for the sounds. So the ability to discriminate sounds can be predicted by how listeners label the sounds. How special is speech? One very influential version of the speech is special idea, called the motor theory of speech perception, held that processes used to produce speech sounds can somehow be run in reverse to understand the acoustic speech signal. Over time, however, a number of problems with the motor theory cropped up. First, it turns out that speech production is at least as complex as speech perception, if not more so. Every aspect of the acoustic signal relates to a particular aspect of the vocal tract. A second reason to doubt the processes for perceiving speech are unique to humans is that numerous demonstrations have shown that non-human animals can learn to respond to speech signals in much the same way that human listeners do. Co-articulation and spectral contrast. Because the co-articulation production of one speech sound always are more like the sounds to proceed to follow. Co-articulations always cause a speech sound to become more like the previous speech sound. Auditory processes that enhance the contrast between successive sounds will undo the stimulation. Preceding sounds do not even have to have speech sounds. Melodies are defined by changes between adjacent notes and not by the exact notes in a particular sound. Spectral contrast helps listeners perceive speech despite the lack of acoustic invariance due to co-articulation. Using multiple acoustic cues. We spend a large chunk of our walking lives listening to speech and identifying people by their faces. Another thing that makes distinguishing individual speech sounds and individual faces similar is that many small differences must be used together in order to discriminate speech, sounds, and the differences in faces. Speech is special because humans have evolved uniquely anatomically machinery for producing it. We spend a great deal of time practicing the perception of speech. We do not need individual acoustic invariants to distinguish speech sounds. We just need to be as good at pattern recognition for sounds as we are for visual images. Learning to listen. Experience is every bit as important for auditory perception, especially for the perception of speech. Prenatal experience with speech sounds appears to have considerable influence on subsequent perception. A newborn prefers hearing her mother's voice over a voice of another woman. Also, newborns prefer hearing a particular children's stories that were read out loud by their mothers during the third trimester of their pregnancy.